It's WrestlePod, the Troopany Show, with your host, James Troopany.
Hello and welcome to the Troopany Show. My name is James Troopany and this is my show. And this week we are on episode 13, unlucky for some, of the Beginner's Guide to Japanese Wrestling. And this week we're looking at, well, basically a New Japan Pro Wrestling TV show from around about 1990, roughly early January, which featured many interesting things. I kind of wanted to pick a show that was kind of average and kind of showing you where New Japan was at this particular time period. Now, this show features two cards. It features the tournament from January the 5th, 1990, which shows you how important that day has been in New Japan Pro Wrestling history. And it looks back at a card not from Tokyo, not even from Japan, but from Moscow in the Soviet Union. The wall hadn't even come down yet. It's actually in the Soviet Union. There's concrete everywhere. And to join me to analyse these two incredibly diverse shows are WrestleTalk's resident TNA expert, Mr. Marcus Green. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Glad to be talking about this jam-packed show.
And also joining me from Shoulders Up is Miss Chelsea Spolin. How are you, Mom?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you very much. So, Chelsea, looking at this card when I sent it to you and said, let's do this, what was your overall impressions?
I'm not gonna lie. When I started watching it, it was a little dense. It's a lot dense. I had context for individuals that are part of this show, right? Like, Chono is obviously very famous, and you know, I was like, oh, okay, I know exactly who that is, and similar things about, you know, a couple of the other performers, but I was still a little bit lost just because it's very different from the New Japan Pro product that I watch right now. I can definitely see the foundations of some of the stuff that you see right now. Like, we've talked a lot on the show about the realism elements of strong style, like trying to make everything look like a shoot fight. And you see a lot of that here. I think the thing that stood out to me the most overall is that it really feels like a sports product and not like a wrestling story product, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Marcus, what are your thoughts on these two shows?
Again, I gotta echo Chelsea's statements. I mean, you know, just coming into this, you know, show, I was, you know, basically blind, and you know, it kind of starting off like Chelsea said, kind of dense, but over, you know, once I started getting more off into the show, I appreciated, you know, just the variety of matches and styles we got, and it kind of reminded me of the journey that, you know, the now infamous Wrestle Kingdom will take you through.
Yeah.
In terms of just, you know, styles and presentation and things of that nature. And like Chelsea said, overall, it was just, you know, not all the soap opera and entertainment stuff. It was sports. It was simple wrestling, technical, efficient, and just when you really come down to it, it was just some great stuff to watch. And a lot of the guys, of course, I was not familiar with, but like Chelsea said, it did lay the foundation for a lot of stuff we do see today. And considering the fact that all this was still during, like you alluded to, a very tumultuous time, you know, for the card to be pulled off and for us to get to some of the matches we got, it was a really cool feat. And you know, overall, it was a high quality show.
Yeah. So the show starts with a highlights of the New Year tournament, which was held on January the 5th, 1990. And it was held in Korukean Hall, just like New Year's Dash is held now. And at this point, Korukean Hall was kind of developing its reputation as the go-to place to have your TV tapings on your weekly shows or your semi-big shows. Korukean Hall was now the home of All Japan Women. It was the home of All Japan Wrestling. It was the home of New Japan Wrestling. It was the home of FMW. This was the show FMW would come along later in the year, but this was the place where everybody went to do something special. This was the point where Korakuen were starting to have 2 or 3 shows a day. Now, for those of you who don't know, Korukean is based in the Tokyo Dome complex, and it's actually underneath the bleachers of the actual Tokyo Dome, and it's a 2,000-seat stadium in a nice TV-friendly size space. And you look at it, and looking at it always strikes me, when you look at the older shots of Korukean, it looks bigger 20 years ago. And I don't know if it's just the way they shoot it and the lenses they used then, but it looks massive compared to now. Am I right, or am I going crazy?
Yeah, I don't know if it's the way they shoot it or the way they light it.
But I think it's the lighting.
Yeah,
yeah, it did have a huger, almost stadium-esque feel to it.
Yeah, it's a bit strange that. Another production now, whilst we're at the Korukean Hall show, it doesn't look any different then than it does now, except for the fact that, it's a slightly different ring, because New Japan have changed sponsors in the last 30 years, but also you have a 2-person commentary crew. They introduce themselves and they just call matches, and that's it. There's no angles, there's no anything else. As Marcus said, this is not soap opera, this is a sports event. And the actual tournament itself was an interesting kind of layout, because it matched up a heavyweight with a junior heavyweight. So the opening match that we saw, because we only see the matches in the TV show of the finalists and who got to the final. So the opening match was Shiro Koshinaka and Masahiro Chono versus Riki Chosu and Hirokuzo Hata. Now, if you like Rasuki Taguchi and his hip attacks, well, Shiro Koshinaka is the guy responsible for making the hip attack cool. He was way cooler than Taguchi, by the way, but that's an argument for another day. Koshinaka and Chono win that opening match. Marcus, what did you think of that particular bout?
It was a nice opener. Definitely, I think with Shiro and Chono, definitely always nice to have tag team that matches, so but specifically, I think what I took away specifically from the tag team stuff was just, it came down to me the chemistry of the teams, and I think with those two specifically, the chemistry was just off the charts. The way they worked, it's almost like they knew what each other was thinking at times. It felt like,
yeah.
And that very much came off well, specifically in a lot of bouts when they ended up facing the team that I specifically got attached to because of one performer in a mask. But it was a solid opener for what we had to come in the finals.
It is interesting to me, just like the speed that they go through the whole tournament. They never let up. They never slow down. And it's very slick, super slick tag team wrestling. There's no real big spots. Everything just flows into each other. Chelsea, what did you think of this?
That was actually the thing that I wrote in my notes, is the speed. One of the complaints that I hear from a lot of Western wrestlers from, I'm going to say, like, people who were popular during the 80s and the 90s. I won't name individual names, but one of the things they complain about is that a lot of the guys now, they say they go too fast. Like, they don't build towards emotional moments well. And watching this match in particular, but also really a lot of the stuff on the card for this show, I was like, what the hell are they talking about? The pacing here was just phenomenal. Like, nobody got blown up, and like you said, everything flowed really, really seamlessly. Everybody, like, I don't know if it's that they had practiced everything beforehand, probably some of that, but I think it was just that all those guys were super familiar with each other, and like Marcus said, they had really good chemistry. They're all just very, very skilled, and it was really impressive that, you're watching this match that kind of half looks like a fight and half looks like a dance almost.
Yeah. No,
it was interesting.
Yeah, so it's something that struck me a couple of years ago when Wrestle One had their deal with TNA, and I think it was Alex Shelley and Kazarian and Daniels were facing the Wrestle One team, and there was Shelley and Kazarian and Daniels have worked together for years and years and years in Ring of Honor. They're super slick. They know what they're doing, but they just look stood still compared to the Wrestle One team because they wrestle in 6-mans all the time. It's what they do, and it's just little stuff like someone gets a finisher on, the other two go cover the corner to make sure it's not an interrupted pin. This is the stuff that you would do if it was a real sport. They do that really, really well. And it's the same thing with this, like just like cutting the ring off, making sure that, everything happened in your corner, specifically in your corner, but you still weren't close enough to ropes for them to be able to get out submission holds. Just looked so cool and looked like they knew it looked so much more realistic and genuine as a sport.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the next match was Naoki Sano and Super Strong Machine, who defeated Akira Nagami and George Takano. George Takano is more known as the Cobra, but out of his mask here and towards the end of his career is the junior heavyweight in New Japan Pro Wrestling. Sano and Strong Machine were very, very good, and you probably guessed they're the ones we're going to be seeing in the finals. Sorry to spoil it for you, but we're watching this show, so you don't have to. Chelsea, what did you think of these two teams?
So first of all, Super Strong Machine is like one of my favorite names in wrestling. I got a good laugh out of that. This was good. I thought both of the teams were really good. It's interesting to me because I feel like one of the things that New Japan Pro does really well now in the present in 2017 is that none of the tag matches that they have that start off a lot of their shows or act as sort of like a cool down match in the middle feel like they diminish any of the participants as singles wrestlers. And that's what I was thinking about when I was watching this, because I feel like, a lot of times when I watch like WWE tag matches, a lot of times maybe one person will come across as a really big star, and that's kind of the point. But everybody else is just sort of like a background player, and they may get one of their signature moves in, but probably not a finisher. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I get that.
And this was, I felt like everybody got to do the stuff that made them really look exceptional and look cool. And that was, I thought, very refreshing.
Marcus, what do you think of these two?
Same, and just talking about Super Strong Machine, became an instant fan, and just throughout the matches that he had, it really felt like, because he had shadows of me, almost like a unique blend of almost Mil Mortez and Matanza almost at times, and it felt like watching him. Because he was great with Sano, but at times I was watching him like, man, he's a one-man wrecking crew. Oh, yeah, he does have a partner. And, that's how I felt like at times. And like Chelsea said, I think one thing I appreciate overall throughout this tournament, because a lot of times just being an American fan, you just get so used to, like I said, the soap opera stuff and the glitz and glam and the high spots. I really, was able to sit down and really just appreciate the small things. Like I said, the regular moves, them mattering, guys not getting up immediately, guys, like you said, James, making sure that, they interrupted pins when they needed to, because a lot of times watching WWE for so long, a guy will take a move and it's like, why you didn't try to break that up? So,
yeah.
I just really sat down and really just appreciated just real strong, good, efficient, I should say, tag team wrestling, and obviously, like you said, Strong Machine and Sano would go to the finals, but overall, just a solid tag match.
I think that's one of the big differences between WWE and Japanese wrestling generally in tag team wrestling is in WWE, in shoot, you only have one chance to break up a pin. After that, the referee's allowed to, the referee will disqualify you.
Right.
Harry Smith, currently of KES, and Suzuki Gun in Japan, in an interview with Wrestle Talk, he went over the WWF tag team rules, and he's like, Harry, I should say, really loves tag team wrestling more than any other kind of wrestling, and because he couldn't do tag team wrestling as he saw it properly, the New Japan way, it kind of annoyed him an awful lot. But it does make it more realistic. Why wouldn't you try and make the save if you're not going to get disqualified?
Yeah.
I mean, and somebody did list up the NWA rules, and apparently in the old days in the NWA, you only got one save as well. So, maybe it's a hangover from those days, but to me it just makes more sense, because it increases tactics, because then you've got to tie up the other guy so you can get the pinfall in. So, but anywho, moving on to the next match, Masa Chono and Shiro Koshinaka defeated Kengo Kimura and Osamu Matsada. Kengo Kimura, who is obviously a long-time veteran of New Japan Pro Wrestling, coming over from that exodus in the 1970s, and Matsuda, his junior heavyweight partner. This was really tradition versus the new way of thinking. Koshinaka and Chono, part of that second generation of New Japan superstars. Marcus, what did you think of these two teams?
Another great tag match. I'm trying to see if it was this one or another one. Whether, like I said, I think one of the things that I appreciate a lot about these matches is that the moves that we normally see kind of just blown through, watching WWE or other matches really counted here. So we got some very poignant suplexes and like you said, hip attacks and stuff like that. And I think, was it this match that we got several back body drops?
Yeah.
and it and normally, watching WWE, that'll be awkward and it'll probably get you ridiculed, but here it made all the sense in the world. Like, why you wouldn't do a move like that over and over again to, wear down your opponent. So it, like I just said, things, and in these matches just makes so much sense where, over in America, you'll just, be looking weird at the TV the whole time. So another solid match. And like I said, with Strong, it, like I said, it was like a one-man army out there. It was like, oh, yes, he does have a partner. But like Chelsea alluded to earlier, all these guys in this tournament was able to look good. And it wasn't this thing of you were just like waiting for a hot tag the whole time. And you can kind of predict how it will go, which really just dulls it a lot of times for, as a WWE fan. But, just extremely competitive both ways. And, yeah, like I said, it just, again, super strong machine all the way.
Do you know who the original super strong machine was?
No.
That was Bill Eadie from Demolition.
Really?
Yeah.
Sweet.
And they had a tag team of the Strong Machines, and the other one was Giant Strong Machine, and that was Andre the Giant in a mask. And they were actually wrestling.
And I'm sure no one knew he was Andre the Giant mask.
No, because there's obviously 6'11" guys who are 400 pounds who can, bench press a house with just 10 a penny in the 1980s. They were massively over in Japan, and they went to the WWF. They had a run in the WWF in the early 80s as well. I think basically they just did it on house shows. I don't think they did it on TV, but basically it meant they got double pay and double duty. So, but never seen in the same room twice. But yeah, Super Strong Machine is in the next match as well. Chelsea, sorry, I didn't ask Chelsea about Koshinaka and Chono, did I?
Oh, no, that's okay. I was excited to see Chono in this period of his career because I mostly haven't before. And I can see how, the character that he has now is kind of like a cool badass. Like, he has that charisma right away. It's funny, Marcus was talking about how the back body drop, they use a lot of them in this match. And I was thinking about it. I was like, that move is really in fashion in Japan right now. But it's really, like you were saying, it makes people look weak here, the way it gets booked. Like, how is that exactly? Like, I couldn't totally figure that out.
I think a lot of this comes down to the culture of how things evolve. Mm-hmm. I mean, me and Alex Watt were discussing this a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about, back in episode 3 or 4, when we were talking about All Japan in the 70s. And we were saying, how certain things now you couldn't get away with. But equally, in Britain, a pile driver and a power bomb were just transitional moves in the 1970s. But in Japan and in North America, they were surefire killer finishers. And still are, to an extent. A pile driver certainly is a finisher these days. Well, in most places. And certainly a power bomb is. Or variations upon a power bomb. So I think it's just... it's what you set up audience expectation to be. A backdrop in a British wrestling ring in the 1980s was a massive move. It was a big move. Whereas in North America, it wasn't so much a big move. But equally, that was risk and reward. In one sense, in a British ring, you didn't see high spots very often because rings were really, really hard. And the wrestlers, most of the wrestlers were part-timers. They were going back to work on Monday morning. They weren't going to take a big back bump like that, because it could put them in hospital if they landed wrong. The big stars who were earning decent money, you could afford to, take a couple of weeks off if things went wrong. they would produce those bumps, but majority of the guys were going back to work on Monday. So it was wrist locks and chain wrestling. The world of sport style really developed from restrictions rather than from anything else, because the rings were terrible. They were tiny, they were small, so you couldn't do as much like high spots and things like that, like from like a flying point of view. So, and also the rules precluded it as well, because of the Mount Evans rules. You weren't allowed to use the ropes really that much in the way that North American wrestlers or Japanese wrestlers, or certainly what Mexican wrestlers did.
Right.
Yeah, and just to echo those sentiments, I think a lot of it has to do with just conditioning. Like, we're conditioned over here, like a back body drop is like one of those opening moves you do early. And, you know, a lot of the moves that we saw on this show that were, you know, as finishers, you know, just with me, it kind of shocked me to a degree, because I'm so conditioned to, okay, that's literally a stepping stool to get to something like, you know, Cena's 5 moves of doom or whatever.
Right. So,
you know, but at the same time, you really don't, you know, having that condition don't take time to appreciate that those moves done properly at the right time can put somebody away. But we're so conditioned over here to, you know, do those moves to get to big, to do moves like a proper belly to belly to get to a fireman's carry, which is, you know, the attitude adjustment is like, really, that's backwards.
Yeah.
Because it's really a weak move that's just been propagated so much that it's looked on as a finisher now. But here, you know, getting finished with a back body drop or belly to belly, or, you know, or another move that we consider weak over here, is another thing that just made me appreciate the show and just shows the difference in, like James said, the evolution of the culture.
Well, I mean, let's just talk about that a second, because Masahiro Chono's finisher in this era was the STF, which is John Cena's submission hold. And Cena, God bless you, big match, John, but your STF is weak.
well, you know why it is, right?
Go on. Yeah.
Because he accidentally choked somebody out one time.
Oh, wow.
So he's
was it Edge?
Possibly, yeah. So he's been a bit gun shy with it ever since, which is understandable. But when Chono does it, it looks like a badass, doesn't he?
Yes.
Yeah, you know, he really, really does. And just what you were saying, again, the attitude adjustment, I don't mean to rag on Cena, but, you know, if you look at the attitude adjustment, the Death Valley driver upon which it is based, which was Etsuka Mita's finish maneuvers, which she invented in 1994, when you look at the footage of Mita doing that DVD for the first time, the crowd goes crazy. Because to do it properly, you are supposed to bring the person down directly on their shoulder blades so it looks like a brainbuster. And then, you know, as people have done it and it's evolved, it's got more to a flat back bump, because that's safer and that's the obvious thing to do.
Right.
Know? And it still looks badass and it still looks cool, but Mita's is still the best 25 years later, because it's still, no one got it quite the way she did it, if you see what I mean.
And you can't call what Cena does, you know, Death Valley. Like, you can't, it doesn't deserve that a name that sounds that ominous.
No. Yeah, I know. So it's WWE as well. I did like, because like Icarus's variation is the Blu-ray where he does the Death Valley driver into the bottom turnbuckle, and they call it a Blu-ray because it's better than a DVD, which is just like such a cool thing, you know, as far as naming a maneuver is concerned. And we don't necessarily talk about that as well. Like the Death Valley driver is such a cool name for a maneuver.
Mm-hmm.
It's the coolest name.
Yeah, you know, and invented by a person who clearly never been anywhere near Death Valley, but she knew how to make it sound right. Or the Japanese commentators did, I guess. Anyway, we'll move on to the next match, which was Naoki Sano and Super Strong Machine, who defeated the late Black Cat and Masa Saito. Now, Masa Saito and Black Cat, that's an interesting team, because though Black Cat was technically a junior heavyweight, he didn't look that much different to the size in Masa Saito. And Saito's clearly the most experienced person in this card. He came up with Inoki back in the late 60s and early 70s. I really enjoyed this match. This was something actually a bit special for what it was. Chelsea, what did you think of these two teams?
So this was probably my favorite of the tag matches that we watched for this podcast. It's very smooth, but it's also very exciting. Like, sometimes in wrestling you get these sequences where the wrestlers know each other really well and they have their, like, you know, their spots that they do when they work together, and it's so smooth that there's no emotional weight to any of it. And all of these guys were so good that you could hear the crowd getting excited as they were wrestling each other. And that was cool. That helps. The crowd reaction is so important, even when you're watching something, or like, I guess especially when you're watching something like this, decades later, like it really gives you a sense of, how important what's happening in the ring is. So the crowd reaction to this was good, and I think that definitely helped me understand and contextualize it. Saito is really interesting. He seems very sure of himself, but not in a cocky character kind of way. Does that make sense? Like, he just kind of knows what he's doing and doesn't need to put on airs about it. Like, doesn't need to be overt about, like, oh, I'm the best and that's why you care. Like, he doesn't BS, for lack of a better term. It's just like, hey, look, I know what I'm doing and you're going to watch. Yeah. And you do because it's true. Yeah. And again, Super Strong Machine was really, like Marcus was saying before, how Super Strong Machine stands out as being really impressive throughout this whole thing. I really enjoyed him in particular in this match. A lot of what he did was very cool and impactful at the same time. Yeah. No, it was, it was very, very cool. And Masahito, he's been around forever as well. He represented Japan in the Olympics in 1964. So maybe that attitude comes from that, like, just I'm a shooter and I know what I'm doing kind of attitude that you sometimes get with those kind of guys. Yeah. And used to working a stadium crowd, comfortable in front of that many people. Well, I mean, he'd wrestled in the NWA, he'd wrestled in Florida, he'd wrestled in Vancouver, he'd wrestled in the WWF. He wrestled everywhere. And also had, 2 years in prison, but we'll talk about that in a bit. Because it never fails to amaze me, this story, but we'll talk about it shortly. Marcus, what did you think of this match?
Good, really good match. Like you said, that kind of meshing of styles with, Black Cat and Saito, and then kind of, like you said, bringing that junior heavyweight vibe into the match. It was really cool seeing that specific, more, I guess, aerial style matched up against somebody like a Strong Machine. And then with their team, I think definitely appreciated seeing, this tournament, I think, crescendo really well, which is something we always get with a Wrestle Kingdom, like I said earlier. But with Sano and Machine specifically, we got to see more of just their dynamic in terms of, tag moves, where a Strong Machine will just dominate a guy, hold him, let Sano get on the rope, jump off, and just move out of the way. Like, it wasn't necessarily those big double move finisher, but it was just something simple and easy like that really solidified just how they were as a tag team, which I thought was really good.
Yeah, just to give you the story on the 2-year jail sentence, because this has been told many times before, but you might not make the connection because it's more associated with Ken Patera. He and Ken Patera one night after a show went to a McDonald's to try and get something to eat, and apparently the staff were just winding them up because they'd shut down, and in retaliation they decided to throw a large boulder through the window. When the police came to investigate later in the evening, they went to the hotel room where Saito and Patera were uncooperative, to say the least. Unbeknownst to them, the local sheriff also happened to be the daughter of the district attorney, according to Jim Ross, and when they finally were arrested, they threw the book at them, and both of them served 2 years for a felony, which obviously, it's their own fault. They probably shouldn't have got wound up so easily. But certainly, it kind of hampered his career, but when he got back to Japan, he walked straight into a main event feud with Antonio Inoki, so it couldn't have been that bad. Lost 2 years of his life, earned a shitload of money when he got out. But anyway, there you go. Who says crime doesn't pay? Moving on to the final of the tournament, it was Masahiro Shono and Shiro Koshinaka who were kind of the stars of the tournament, and arguably probably the most even balanced of the two teams. You had a future ace of the company and a future junior heavyweight ace. This was kind of like Tanahashi and Kishida teaming together, really, and they defeated Sano and Super Strong Machine in the final, in a really, really good final. I really enjoyed this match. Marcus, what did you think of it?
Yeah, this was probably my favorite match, definitely of the tournament, and probably probably of the show, just because of, I think this was definitely, like I said, a great crescendo ending, and really represents everything we've been talking about, like real tag team chemistry, and just great execution and sufficiency with the moves and everything. And I think this was the perfect showing of just, those tag team dynamics. And it really kind of came down to, with Chono and Shiro, like I said, them being super gelled and just, like I said, really at times looking like they could read each other's mind. And eventually it came down to a point where they would like, okay, we're going to isolate Sano, and just kind of go with super strong. And then they had to switch up at the end. And it really came down to them, really making Sano and super strong just have a simple miscommunication. And that's what it really came down to. So I thought, it was well executed and like a really great ending to the tag tournament. And with Chano and Shiro would really be great, because they really kind of reminded me of what we get today from guys like the Revival.
Yeah,
and just how that chemistry goes, and that would be such a great dream match, just because of, like, these are two teams that really seem to work on one mind when they're in the ring. So I thought it was a great ending, probably my favorite match of the night.
The last time I saw these two wrestle, last time I saw Koshinaka wrestle, he was tagging with Arisa Nakajima against, I can't remember who was wrestling against. It was another mixed gender tag team, and he was just bossing her around like, do this, do this, do this. And it was like proper ring generalship in like a tag match. And Nakajima, she was like flying all over the place because she told him to. It was really, really cool. It was a JWP card, but yeah. Chelsea, what did you think of this tag match?
This was really good. All of these guys, like I knew at this point getting to it in the card, I was like, man, all of these guys are so exceptional. It was interesting how fast everything was, but it wasn't missing that emotional weight that you need in the finale to a tournament. Like that's a hard balance to strike, I think. Where everybody gets to look cool and look really, show off how technically proficient they are, but also gets to tell the story of the match really well. I think Sano looked more interesting in this match than in the previous two matches, I guess I saw him in before this on the card. I also felt a little bad for him when everybody went after him. Just like all these guys are so good and perform at such a high standard. It was a really impressive final, and I came away wanting to look up more of Super Strong Machine and look up more of of Koshinaka from this period, so that I can watch more of their matches and kind of see like how everything evolved to the stuff that I'm more familiar with from later.
Yeah. Now, just to wrap up this part of the show that we watched, how important is it to New Japan as January the 5th? I mean, January the 4th is the big show. You've got all these eyes on the product. You've sold out the Tokyo Dome. Well, you've tried your best. I think back in those days they were getting around 55,000 paying customers at least. And maybe
that's not bad.
That's not bad, And as they go on the decade, they were getting like 65,000 people in the building, 50 to 55,000 people had paid. You've got all these eyes on the product, and then on January the 5th, they produce a show that is a mixed division tag team tournament. But you've got all these eyes on the product. People are talking about New Japan, and you've got all these new stars. Chono is just come back off excursion. Koshinaka had a run in All Japan, so he's back from All Japan Pro Wrestling. You're trying to build these two stars up, and it's such a good way of doing it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is funny because on paper it doesn't necessarily sound like a tag tournament is going to be the thing that works for that.
Yeah. So very, very interesting. Now I'm going to play a piece of music to match up to our next part of the show. I hope you're liking it. It's a stirring little rendition. Excuse me a second. There we go. There you go. How's that? How you feeling now, guys?
Rocky Fourish.
Yes.
It makes you feel good for the motherland, doesn't it? There you go. Fade that out. There. That's the national anthem of the Soviet Union there, which is relevant because the next part of the show was actually from the Soviet Union, believe it or not. We're talking before the wall came down. We're talking USSR, CCCP. We're talking proper communism of an old-fashioned variety. And in this time period, Antonio Inoki had actually negotiated contracts to two wrestlers, one of which was Salaman Hashimokov, and the other one was Viktor Zanjiev. Okay, and they both went over to the New Japan Dojo around about 1989. They were trained there, and actually Hashimokov ended up being an IWGP Heavyweight Champion. He was a very good pro wrestler, certainly enough for New Japan to put interest and put the title on him. Now, obviously, they came from an Olympic wrestling background. They were both freestyle medalists for Russia, and quite clear products of the fact that the Russians were not using steroids at the time, because they looked like two guys who ate tires. And that's how they trained, by eating tires as well as flipping them. But they went back to Moscow and they did a show. Now, the entire show is not shown on what we watched, and I can give you a rundown of those matches. What we missed out of this match was Kuniaka Kobayashi versus Takaya Izuka. Kobayashi is long-time junior heavyweight. Iizuka would go on to be the current... I'm pretty sure it's the current... Sorry, I'll get it. Iizuka was... sorry, because I'm pretty sure it's the Iizuka we know now. But I'm going to make sure.
It's the same Iizuka who's part of Suzuki Gun.
Yeah, it's the same Iizuka who's part of Suzuki Gun, which tells you how long he's been around, because that was 28 years ago. And then we had Jushin Thunder Liger versus the original Black Tiger, Mark the Rollerball Rocco. A British guy managed to get behind the Iron Curtain for a wrestling match, which shows you how much pull Inoki has. Masahiro Chono defeated Timur Zalazov, which also wasn't on... the show that we watched, and then we get to the matches that we did see, which we'll go through in a second. So that was the opening part of the card. 15,000 people turned up to watch this at the Central Lenin Stadium in Moscow, now currently known as the Luzhniki Stadium. This was interesting. This entire concept of like getting communists to come and be professional wrestlers. Chelsea, what's your thoughts on this?
This was fascinating. Like, it occurred to me watching this that I had never seen any kind of wrestling out of Russia before, other than just like watching the Olympics, which is of course not pro wrestling. So I wasn't sure what to expect from the crowd and from the Russian wrestlers. This first match was interesting. It's very stiff, and there's a lot of submissions, and it drags on a little bit, but not to the point where you can't enjoy it. It's like there's a lot of tension there. Like, both of them are really, really skilled competitors, and there seemed to be a lot of pride of like, I have to make you submit by tearing your arm off. No, I'm going to tear your arm off instead. It was interesting because I felt like the crowd wasn't totally sure who they were gonna cheer for, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
like the crowd was almost like politely restrained.
It wasn't a hometown boy kind of deal, was it, really?
No, and I wasn't expecting that. It felt like a match that got both of those guys over in a sense that they both got to show how good they were. But it also didn't, to me, like, I had to go back to my notes to remember who won because that wasn't really what I took away from it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. The match we're talking about is Ricky Chosu versus Viktor Zanjiev, isn't it? So, I mean, Chosu's known for his direct way of going about things, and I guess this was kind of like played into this style of match. It was very submission heavy. He was trying to get the best out of Zanjiev, I guess, as well, who's obviously his best work can be on the mat, because they didn't even go anywhere near the ropes for the first 8 minutes, did they? No. So yeah, Marcus, what did you think of these two?
This was another match that kind of made me appreciate. I think we we got a lot of kind of that catch as catch can style.
Yeah.
In this match, and it, you know, like you said, it kind of took it back to that traditional, you know, mat based style, which, you know, it's what evolved from, and it really made me, you know, also appreciate that, because that takes, you know, efficient stamina, you know, patience, and really, you know, teach you the importance of leverage in a match. And a lot of times over in America, we get that kind of in the first few, like I said, opening minutes of a match, and then obviously we just kind of get, you know, what we get with, you know, just the high spots in the action and whatnot. But this kind of made me appreciate it, and like Chelsea said, the crowd was kind of split. But well, shout out to Victor, not being afraid to show that hair. I can appreciate that. But yeah, you know, while it seems sluggish at times, you know, it did make me, like I said, appreciate that particular style, because it is not easy as people probably look, or you know, look at it at first glance, because it is legitimately you trying to, you know, tap a guy out and really just wear him down, and that just zaps your energy. So for them to be able to do that, you know, like I said, it was just another showing of the different styles we got on this show. And to say all that with it ending in a brain buster, I think. Yeah, it did. Which was crazy. Like, you know, Ricky, he got off that mat like, look, man, I'm gonna win this my way. So, you know, we're not gonna be down on that mat all day. So, you know, really cool match.
Well, yeah, and also, like, when Zangief actually did go to the top rope for a frog splash, it meant something. The crowd went crazy for it.
Yeah.
You know, that was the less you do sometimes is a good thing. Well, the next match we saw, which actually isn't the right order in the card, but what the hey. Oh, the next thing we saw was a all-girl band in fluorescent leggings, which was surprising, to say the least. And then the next thing we saw was Shinya Hashimoto, who wrestled Waka Evlov in 15-minute time limit draw. Now, Evlov wasn't part of the deal that went to the New Japan Dojo, but he was obviously fairly proficient in the fighting arts. I think he was another amateur wrestler. And Hashimoto had a good kind of match with him, really. It was interesting. It was very mat-based and very submission-based, which is kind of Hashimoto's deal. He liked that kind of thing. So it was right in his ballpark. So, yeah, for 15 minutes, it was very entertaining. And, you know, we'll talk about the booking of the whole show in a minute, but again, it wasn't a direct win for Evlov, and it didn't really do Hashimoto any harm, because he tended to be the dominant player through the game. Marcus, what did you think of this match?
Yeah, it was interesting. It got to a point I was watching it at, and I was thinking to myself, like, okay, is this a submission match? Like, strictly, like, you can only win by submission, because, you know, that's what it was. But again, I appreciated it, because, you know, that's another, you know, technical side of the game that, you know, we don't always get. I mean, we see that with certain guys, but that's not really an overarching thing over here with a lot of guys, because of the soap opera and entertainment emphasis that we see a lot of times. But 15 minutes draw, I don't necessarily really root for draws, but it really showed again, like you said, the competitive nature and the fighting feel that this show had. So in that aspect, I appreciate it. Not my favorite match of the night, but you know, I appreciate it for what we got.
Yeah, Chelsea, what did you think of this submission specialists? Kind of
both
fair.
Of these guys wanted to win this match so bad. Like, the competitive spirit was very strong, like Marcus said, and it's hard to watch sometimes submission wrestling go on for so long, because you get to a point where you're like, is somebody gonna tap out already? But both of those guys are skilled enough and know enough different ways to apply really painful looking submission holds that, I mean, not running out of gas for 15 minutes, that's pretty impressive. Something that kind of struck me is that I don't think of, you know, I was trying to think of like submission wrestlers that I know of who are popular now to draw a contrast. And most of them tend to be, most of the men anyway, tend to be a little slighter of build. You know, both of these guys are fairly big guys, and I thought that was interesting that was the approach to like picking. I don't know if they like set up like this is the match we want to have, and then they picked those guys to be in it, or if they picked those guys to be in it, and then those guys figured out that this was the match they wanted to have. But either way, that was still really interesting to me because, in a way, it almost made it a little bit more realistic because they were both about the same size and they, moved each other around very, very, like, it looked very natural. Like, it looked like a real fight.
Yeah. And
that's something you don't always get with submission matches now, even in New Japan, where everybody who gets to do them is very, very good at them. Sometimes you look at it and you're like, well, that one guy is a lot more ripped than that other guy. That other guy is very slight. Like, how is it possible that he hasn't tapped out yet?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Hashimoto, his nickname was the Destroyer, and Shinsuke Nakamura says he's the last strong style wrestler New Japan produced. He doesn't believe strong style had actually evolved anymore until after Hashimoto. So,
Wow.
That's the kind of like, and that development of that character, the Destroyer character, comes from matches like this and going off to do shoot style matches in UWFI and doing other bits and pieces throughout his career where he made appearances outside of New Japan just to prove he was a really good submission style wrestler. So, and he's Hashimoto's kind of still evolving that Destroyer character. We'll see in a couple of episodes' time when he's IWGP Heavyweight Champion and some of the matches he had with Scott Norton that were, there is an argument to be said that Scott Norton never had a great match. I disagree. The matches he had with Hashimoto were absolutely fantastic and they were absolutely made for one another. So we'll see how he develops. But yeah, it is interesting. Like, you're right that I mean, the modern day phrase and analogy is grapple f***ing, isn't it, really? And it's kind of that. If you get two guys who do it wrong, it can be interminably bad. But these guys knew what they were doing, or at least Hashimoto knew enough to make Everlov look good. He didn't, they weren't. He wasn't going to embarrass him in front of his hometown crowd because they wanted to make sure they made money next time they came back, if indeed they came back. So the next match was Salman Hashimokov, who defeated NWA stalwart, Raging Bull Manny Fernandez. Not normally a New Japan guy, I don't think. Certainly just the biggest thing I can remember him being was the partner with Rick Rude in the Crockett Tag Team Cup, Crockett Cup Tag Team Tournament in the early 80s, and him and Rick Rude had a good run in there. I think they were finalists one year. This was an interesting match, because Fernandez was good enough to kind of like make Hashimokov a very interesting kind of opponent. I thought this was pretty cool. I enjoyed this. And I've got some other things to talk about with Hashimokov afterwards. But Chelsea, what did you think of these two?
I was really impressed at how easily they threw each other around. Like, there are some moments in this match where they go from being completely on the mat to one guy is like sailing through the air and goes halfway across the ring. And that takes some serious strength and some considerable skill. This was really brutal. Like, and then it wasn't in the same way. Like, both of those guys were really invested in like when every time somebody locks a submission in, it really looks like, oh my god, that guy's going to lose an arm. But the moments when they're standing across from each other, staring at each other, you're not thinking about like, oh, that guy is in so much pain. How can he be standing right now? You know, like they felt very evenly matched. This was cool, but I don't know if it really told a story apart from the athleticism. At least maybe if it did, I didn't personally like latch onto it. Maybe I didn't have enough context for it.
I think maybe it was just one of those sporting contests that was pretty even.
Yeah.
Just sometimes I think certainly the crowd were into it.
Yeah.
Hashimokov had a lot more presence than his counterparts, I think. If out of all the guys that were on this card who were Russian, you'd want him as your heavyweight champion. Like you could see why. He has presence. He has a certain amount of charisma, which is really important, especially in Japan, where you're not going to speak the home language. You're not going to cut a bunch of promos. So yeah, he's I think it's probably the right guy to go with. Marcus, what did you think of these two?
This was probably my second favorite match of the night.
Interesting.
just because of it was like really super competitive. And that's not to take away from the other matches, but this one just kind of had me captivated a little bit because I just saw so many different things. And I kind of in my notes I put down three things. Like we got classic wrestling, brawling, and then sumo almost to a point because obviously we got the moves, the suplexes, and like Chelsea said, the flying through the air, and then it got to a point where they just get up and try to knock each other's block off, and then they get up again, and then it just be like they just try to move each other around, and it was really cool, and it's just terms of the the overall feel of it. It's funny that one of the guys is named Raging Bull. Because that's what it really felt like at times, two bulls going at it, and me mentioning just kind of how we kind of saw shades of with this overall show with Wrestle Kingdom. This kind of felt like that part of the show where we get that never open weight match. Yeah, where it's like you know what you're in for, but this was like obviously a more tamer version of that because it wasn't as cringeworthy as we sometimes get with a never open weight just because of how just car crash it is at times, but super competitive, and like you said, it was just two guys giving no corner with each other, just going at it, and it made the best man win kind of vibe. So I really appreciated that.
Excellent. Yeah, I kind of enjoyed this one. I do have to say. Right then, we moved on to the main event, which was Antonio Inoki versus Shota Choshivili, who also had some New Japan experience, and they defeated Brad Reggins, former Olympic wrestler, and Masa Saito. Now, Shota Choshivili had defeated Antonio Inoki for the WWF World Martial Arts Heavyweight Championship in 1989, which would later become the Greatest 18 Martial Arts Championship in the next couple of years and slowly get merged with the IWGP Heavyweight Championship. Now, Choshivili was originally a judoka and had a lot of experience. He was an Olympian in 1972 and in 1976, and he spent some time in New Japan training to be a pro wrestler as well, though decided not to be a pro wrestler himself, and unfortunately passed away in 2009. This match was interesting because it was very much trying to get Choshivili over as an MMA guy, not as necessarily as a wrestling guy. And obviously you had Saito was another former Olympian, and Reggins was also an Olympian as well. So this was kind of wrestling on that pure sports narrative again, Chelsea. What did you think of this particular main event?
So this was interesting. You can really feel the tension between the idea of sort of like the brand of strong style where everything is supposed to look like a real fight, and that sort of like MMA style where moves are effective in terms of this will actually disable your opponent, but may not necessarily look like a cool, flashy wrestling move.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that was really interesting. It felt to me, and I don't know how true this is, almost like maybe the performers didn't get a lot of time to work with each other beforehand, because maybe it was just that they were really good at selling the story of it being a competition, but it felt like maybe some of that tension was really like, I'm not sure how much I trust you, so I have to take you down right now as painfully as possible. And if it is, then that's good storytelling. Like that's wrestling a lot of times is supposed to make you believe that it's really real. But I don't know if I felt like everybody got to be showcased as like the best version of themselves, if that makes any sense. I don't know. It sort of felt like maybe there were a few too many things happening.
I think maybe it was interesting to me how, like, I suppose everyone was laying everything in pretty thick because they're all four of them are genuine hard cases, so that you can lay things in, and especially when you've got somebody who's really inexperienced. Choshivili has only got like a year's experience under his belt. Yes, it's been in the main event, but Antonio Inoki's been looking after him in the main event. So there are advantages to laying stuff in then. Because it makes everybody look stronger, even though you have to make the rest holds an awful lot longer and hope no one gets knocked out in the process. So yeah, I can understand what you're saying. the trouble, I think that's sometimes what you get with tag matches as well, because everyone's trying to get their shit in the time allowed. That can sometimes take over from the story of the tag match, unlike the things we saw in the tag team tournament, that would occur a couple of days later. This card was on New Year's Eve in 1989, and then in 1990, 5 days later, you had that astounding tag team tournament that we've just been talking about. So this is kind of like the opposite of that. Bunch of really experienced guys. Have a match that's only okay. So, yeah, I can see where you're coming from that, certainly. Marcus, what did you think of this main event?
I echo y'all's sentiments. I mean, it's okay match. I think the thing I take away the most with this, obviously, like Chelsea said, with the that contrast to that MMA style with that strong style contrast. But I was just kind of captivated by Inoki, just because not only the look and everything, and obviously him being just a legend, but every time he stepped into the ring, the excitement from the crowd, and he was just really relentlessly methodical. And just how he moved and how he attacked. And, he just really seemed like he was just aware of everything that was going on, and really seemed like an assassin when he got in there and, kind of laid the groundwork, and then Billy kind of came in and capitalized. So that's kind of what obviously it was a solid match, but like I said, not my favorite over this overall show, but it, it was a fitting end. Obviously, Inoki's team got the win, but overall, I was kind of captivated by Inoki and just the way he moved, and the way the crowd just erupted every time he got in there, and just overall the way he attacked his opponents.
Yeah, and so that kind of wraps up our coverage of this particular card. But we have some footnotes here to talk about as well. Now, Zangief and Hashimokov, like we said, ended up going to the dojo as well. They had much more successful careers. Zangief ended up being a fairly reasonable mid-carder for about a year in the New Japan locker room. And Hashimokov as well was actually, like we said, the IWGP heavyweight champion the following year, and obviously got a lot more out of it. In the same period of time, you've got the Soviet Union falling apart. Now, of course, there's something to think about before we talk about those two, though. You got Manny Fernandez and Brad Rheingans on this card, two Americans at the end of the Cold War, because we're still talking about George H.W. Bush was president of the United States of America. So this is Chelsea, Marcus. How does this happen?
How does which part happen?
How do the Americans going to a communist country? How does that happen? Let's start there, because how the hell are you going to get permissions to do that?
Some very good negotiations, I would say.
Those meetings must have been very interesting.
I certainly think so. I mean, it kind of shows you the kind of political ideas that Inoki had. He wanted to save the world through professional wrestling, and we'll look at a card in a few years' time that had even bigger negotiations to deal with. But we'll look at that in a few weeks' time as we go through these biggest cards of the 1990s. But like I said, Hashimokov and Zangief did have a presence in Japan, but they also had a presence in North America. In 1990, there was the Pat O'Connor Memorial Tag Team Tournament in WCW, which was won by the Steiner brothers, and these two wrestled as a tag team through that tournament and showcased their freestyle wrestling style, and were very, very good and very, very surprising. Like I said, the tournament was eventually won by the Steiners, and I would have really loved to have seen the Russians versus the Steiners in that tournament. Sadly, didn't happen because they went out to the team of Masa Saito and Kieji the Great Muta. So, yeah, interesting time period for New Japan Pro Wrestling and trying to find new markets outside of Japan. This is not the first time that they've tried to do this recently. This is New Japan's manifest destiny. Just as the WWE tried to expand worldwide, so did New Japan Pro Wrestling. They just did it in a different way. How successful do you think they could have been if they'd stuck with this, guys? Who'd like to have a go at that question?
I don't know if it would have worked.
Is it a watchable product? Because this is... There's not an awful lot of variety on this card. As interesting as it is, as a historical artifact, it's interesting. And for us, as kind of connoisseurs of indie wrestling and watching wrestling in different styles, and we're used to this kind of thing, but for a kind of like a mainstream entertaining audience, would it really work?
I don't know if there's enough variety, and I also don't know if it's focused enough on highlighting the participants as individuals rather than like, this is this really athletic match and you're going to care about the elements of this match specifically for it to work as a long-term mainstream product.
Yeah, I think I'd agree, because we very much a culture that likes to get attached to things and people and kind of, be in this person's corner and have a reason why we root or why we boo. And while this, like you said, this was a great display of just, pure competition, we cater more to that, having reasons to root and boo for people. So I think in the long term, it might have not necessarily worked out just because of how we've come to be conditioned over time, specifically with how, we see things, extend to such a great period with New Japan storylines that kind of go from year to year, with overarching and underarching plots.
Certainly, yeah. I can see where you're coming from with those comments. Now, we got a lot of the information for this episode today from the WrestlingInsomniac.com, which has full match listings for that. So if you want to put in New Japan Pro Wrestling in the Soviet Union into Google and the Wrestling Insomniac, I'm sure you can find some extra information there that we haven't given you today, as well as places you can find this card if you wish to go and have a look at it. And it's certainly an interesting period in New Japan Pro Wrestling's history. So we will be back soon with another episode of The Beginner's Guide to Japanese Wrestling, but I'd like to thank my contributors for today, Mr. Marcus Green at Paradox Kid, President WrestleTalk TNA expert. If you look at WrestleTalk.tv, you can see a load of his articles. Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Pleasure as always.
And also from Shoulders Up, that's at Shoulders_up on Twitter, and at Chelsea Comics for herself on Twitter. I'd like to thank Chelsea Spollen for her time today.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate that. If you would like to go and find out more of this stuff, if you look on our SoundCloud, I have actually listed all the beginner's guides to Japanese professional wrestling together, so you can all listen to them in order, and you get an idea of how everything's going. We're up to around about 12 or 13 hours of stuff on there now, so it should keep you going for a while, hopefully. And we hope you're finding these shows informative and giving you an interesting look at things that happened back in the 1990s, the craziest era of professional wrestling there is. Please do listen to the other shows on the Wrestle Talk Podcast Network. You can listen to Gavin and Paul on the Squash, and you can listen to Ollie and Finn Martin on the Finn Martin Report. You can also listen to me and Finn Martin on Wrestling Histories if you hook up with WrestlePlus.com. We're also looking at the 1990s, but we're looking at North America in the 1990s at the moment, which has been looking at 1994 in recent weeks. Thank you very much for your time. The Troopany Show will be back next week. Take care and see you soon. Bye.